Look at the color on this beam, Alex. You see that deep charcoal gray? That didn't come out of a tin or a chemical factory. That's 70 years of the sky beating on a barn door. It's a map of every storm that's rolled through the county since the Truman administration.
It's beautiful, Tiger, truly. But to my eyes, it also looks like a map of where I'm going to break my expensive carbide saw blade. It's covered in grit, and I can see at least 3 headless nails just waiting to turn my table saw into a fragmentation grenade.
You see a hazard, I see a story. But you aren't wrong. Working with salvaged timber is a bit like dating a tiger. It's thrilling, but if you don't pay attention to the teeth, you're going to have a very bad afternoon.
Is that why we're doing this today? To keep the listeners from getting mauled by their lumber? Because everyone's obsessed with the reclaimed look right now, but I feel like people just dive into the dumpster without a plan.
Exactly. Everyone wants the soul of the old wood, but nobody wants the splinters or the shrapnel. Today, we're peeling back the layers on how to handle wood that's lived a previous life. Whether it's barn siding, old joists, or those massive floorboards from a textile mill, there's a way to do it that doesn't end with you at the urgent care clinic.
Okay, let's start with the teeth. If I'm pulling wood out of an old fence or a demolished attic, what's the first thing I do before I even think about bringing it near a machine?
You buy a metal detector. Not the kind for finding pirate gold on the beach, though that's a fun Saturday, but a little handheld wand used for security. If you skip this, you're basically playing Russian roulette with your tools. I once ran a piece of clean-looking chestnut through my joiner and hit a ceramic-coated insulator screw that had been swallowed by the tree 50 years ago. The sound it made, it wasn't a mechanical failure, it was a scream.
I remember that. You didn't speak for 3 hours. You just sat on that stool staring at the wall.
I was mourning my dignity and a $200 set of knives. Beyond metal, you've got to think about the invisible guests. Bugs, termites, and powder post beetles don't care that your wood has character. They just see a buffet.
So how do we handle the hitchhikers? Most people don't have a giant industrial kiln in their backyard to bake the critters out.
If you're serious about it and you're working with wood that's been sitting in the dirt or against a damp wall, you've got to get it up to temperature, about 140 degrees internal, for a few hours. Some guys build a hot box using rigid foam insulation and a space heater, but you've got to be incredibly careful you don't burn the shop down. Honestly, sometimes the best move is just to leave the wood with a local kiln operator for a few days. It might cost you a crate of beer, but it beats having your new coffee table slowly turn into a pile of sawdust on your living room rug.
People see these reclaimed projects online and they're so pristine, but the wood I find looks like it was fished out of a shipwreck. How do you clean this stuff without losing the very age that makes it cool?
It's a delicate balance. You want to knock off the loose grime, and the bird presents, let's be honest about what's on barnwood, without erasing the texture. I start with a stiff nylon brush. If that doesn't do it, I move to brass. You want to avoid steel wire brushes if you can, because they can leave tiny fragments of metal in the grain that will rust and leave weird black streaks later when you apply a finish.
What about the gray? If I sand it, I lose that silver patina, right? It just turns back into regular brown wood.
That's the heartbreak of it. The patina is only paper thin. If you want to keep that weathered look, you have to be surgical. I usually leave the faces alone as much as possible and only clean up the joinery. If I have to sand, I use a very light touch with a high grit, or sometimes I'll use a nylon abrasive wheel on a drill. It gets into the nooks and crannies of the grain without flattening out the history.
But isn't that wood usually warped? I mean, 50 years of Maryland humidity tends to turn a board into a propeller. How do you build a flat table out of a potato chip?
You have to listen to what the wood is willing to give you. If it's bowed 4 inches over 6 feet, don't try to force it straight. You'll just create a piece of furniture that's under so much internal tension, it'll eventually explode. You cut it into shorter segments, or you build thick. You use the thickness of the wood to hide the inconsistencies. Sometimes you just embrace the wonk.
Let's talk design. Yoav Liberman, who wrote that fantastic guide on reclaimed wood, mentions that it's not just about the wood, it's about the found objects too. How do you mix materials without making it look like a junkyard exploded in your den?
It's about contrast. If everything is rusty and old, it just looks like you're a hoarder. But if you take a piece of timber that looks like it's been through a war and pair it with a very clean, modern steel leg or a crisp, white oak drawer front, the contrast makes the old part pop. It gives the eye a place to rest.
It's like putting a tuxedo on a mountain man.
That is exactly it. You need the tuxedo to appreciate the beard. I did a table once where I used old gym floorboards. They still had the painted lines from the basketball court. Instead of sanding them off, I featured them right down the center, but I encased the whole thing in a very sharp, mitered walnut frame. It made the messy part look intentional. That's the secret. Intention.
What about the finish? I've seen people put thick, glossy polyurethane over old wood and it just looks plasticky, like they shrink wrapped a piece of history.
Ugh, don't get me started. Putting high gloss poly on reclaimed wood is a crime against humanity. You want a finish that disappears. I'm a big fan of hard wax oils, things like Osmo or Rubio Monocoat. They soak in, protect the fiber, but leave the wood feeling like wood. You want to be able to reach out and feel the texture of the grain, not a layer of cured plastic.
Does it take more finish? Reclaimed wood always feels like it's thirsty, like a sponge that hasn't seen water in a decade.
Oh, it'll drink you out of house and home, especially the end grain. I usually apply a light seal coat first, just to stop the wood from inhaling the expensive stuff. But that thirst is also why the color gets so deep. Old wood has a way of taking finish that new lumber just can't replicate. There's a density to the resins that have hardened over time.
Let's get real for a second. We talk about this like it's this romantic journey, but isn't it also just a huge pain in the neck? You spend 4 hours cleaning a board that you could have bought clean at the lumberyard in 5 minutes.
You're not wrong, Alex. My back usually reminds me why I should just buy S4S maple every time I haul a beam out of a basement. But there's a moment, and it usually happens when you make that first cut, where you smell the wood. If it's old heart pine, it smells like a forest fire mixed with vanilla. If it's old oak from a brewery, it might still smell like fermenting grain. You're working with something that has stayed alive, in a way, for a century.
So it's about the connection?
It's about not being wasteful. We live in a world where everything is disposable. When you take a piece of wood that was destined for a landfill or a burn pile and you turn it into a dining table where a family is going to have Christmas dinner for the next 50 years, that's not just woodworking. That's a rescue mission.
Tiger's Timber Rescue. I can see the t-shirts now. But seriously, if someone's listening and they've got a pile of old pallets or some fencing in the backyard, what's the one mistake they should avoid today?
Don't overprocess. The biggest mistake is trying to make old wood look like new wood. If you wanted a perfectly flat, perfectly clear, boring cherry board, go buy one. If you're using reclaimed wood, let it be what it is. Leave the nail holes. Leave the staining around the old bolts. Those aren't defects. They're the wood's resume.
I like that. The wood's resume. Just maybe make sure the resume doesn't include living with a colony of spiders before you bring it into the house.
Always check for spiders. That's a free tip for life, not just woodworking.
All right, I think I'm inspired. I might actually go tackle that old crate in my garage, but I'm borrowing your metal detector.
Take it. Just bring it back without any new dents.
No promises. Thanks for the breakdown, Tiger.
Anytime. Now, let's go make some sawdust, preferably the kind that doesn't have lead paint in it.
Good point. Wear your masks, people.